meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. We're headed into the home stretch here, and we have our two real-life broodmares here with us today. I wanted to take a minute to give you a couple of basic facts and information about these two mares, and then Catherine is going to go over briefly a little bit about evaluating body condition, and then we'll move into a little bit more of the physical with Dr. Nieman and Dr. Carroll. So this mare closest to me, I think I'll point out what I personally find quite interesting is that both of these mares are senior mares. Multitasker here is 18, and Lady with a Secret is 20. But they couldn't be more different in terms of what their broodmare careers actually looked like. Multitasker here, closest to me, has been, she's a 2006 mare. She's actually half to Shared Belief. She had 16 starts and earned about $72,000 and retired from racing in 2010. And then she entered her broodmare career, and she's been bred consecutively since 2011, and she's produced 9 foals. Her breeding this year didn't take, so now she's available for a private rehoming. And Lady with a Secret on the far side there, she is available for adoption through the Second Stride program. She is a 2004 mare, had 20 starts, about $40,000 in earnings, and also retired in 2010. She was bred 3 times, produced 2 foals. The last breeding that she had was in 2015, and she has been largely sitting in a field until she came to Second Stride. So in a way, Multitasker has had a little bit more of a regular program, ongoing handling, that sort of thing. And Lady has, spent the better part of a decade not doing very much. But both of them, as you can see, are quite sensible. And Lady has taken to riding and handling quite well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Catherine, and we'll look a little bit at the body condition on both of these mares.
Thank you. So we'll start with this mare here. And so when we're body condition scoring, we can take a look to begin with at the overall horse. And one of the first places we can look when we're having a general assessment of body condition score is at their ribs. So can we visibly see the ribs? And at that point, if we can, then that will suggest that their body condition score is going to be a 4 or below. If we can't see the ribs, then that says that we're going to be a body condition score of 5 or above. And then we can start to feel and assess the different areas. So I'll come to the other side. So the 6 areas that we discussed that we want to feel to assess body condition score are the ribs. So we'll look here, and again, we can see if we can see them, and then also can we easily feel them. So there she does have some fat coverage over her ribs. The other area that we can look at is behind her shoulder. And again, we can see here that she does have some fat right behind her shoulder. We'll then assess over the neck. So you can put your hand over her crest like this. And then you can also have a look below and see and feel how much fat she has on her neck. And then the next spot is looking at the withers. And then over and along the back. And because she is an older mare, her top line, she's lost some muscle, but she does have a little bit of fat covering. And then we'll look at her tail head here. And so she has a little bit. So I would probably put her at around a 5, if not maybe like a 4.5, because I sometimes can see her ribs, or I'm not, so it depends how she stands. So I would say, but generally she's in a good condition, and also being an older mare that hasn't been in work too. So when we're looking at body condition score, we're trying to assess fat, not necessarily how much muscle they have, and that can sometimes be easily confused. So just keeping that in mind, trying to assess how much fat coverage she has. Any questions or more?
Any questions about this mare? Okay, let's take a look at Lady. We'll swap them out here.
So the same, we'll take an overall look of how condition-wise she is and overall appearance. Again, looking at the ribs, can we see them? And then going in and feeling and seeing if we can actually feel them easily. And this is the area that you would assess and sort of run your hand over to really get an idea of how much fat she has there. Again, we're looking at the neck, over the withers, and then over the back, and then also looking at the tail head and having a feel here. So overall, she's in really good condition too, and I probably would put her at a 5. So.
All right, thank you, Catherine. I think both of these broodmares look quite well, considering their age and their activity level. Glad to see both of them looking so good. Any questions before we move on to the kind of physical aspect of this? Okay. Okay, so we're going to spend the remainder of the session talking a little bit about the physical activity level, how reproductive events or procedures might impact a mare in a prolonged way or in a chronic way, perhaps, as she returns to a riding career. Talk a little bit about soundness, conformational changes, and how we can kind of keep these mares comfortable and plan a transition that is appropriate and takes all of these things into account. So with us for this session, we have Dr. Larkspur Carroll, who is the founder of Core Therapies. She got her veterinary degree from Ohio State University and then moved back to the area to intern here at Rood & Riddle before founding Core Therapies. The Carroll family is well known in the thoroughbred racing industry. Lark has been galloping horses since teen years, probably, yeah. Still? Are you still galloping?
No, but that's a sore subject.
Okay, sorry, my bad.
I would like to be.
Yeah, we'll take that for that. And both she and her daughter are accomplished equestrians as well. So good. Both of these ladies have experience on the racing side and also on the equestrian side. So also we have Dr. Natanya Nieman, who is the general manager and resident veterinarian at WinStar Farm. She has been there since 2002, like it's still in the 20s here, 2002, and was promoted to the general manager role this year. She's played an integral role in veterinary care across the farm and has a strong interest in rehabilitation and sports medicine. She also is a graduate of The Ohio State University and an active rider of off-track thoroughbreds, I think predominantly in eventing, correct? Okay. Natanya and her husband, Mike McMahon, also own and operate Spruce Lane Farm, a breeding, racing, and sales operation. Do we want to hear a little bit, just before we go further, we can talk to Kim a little bit about what this horse has been like as they've come into the program at Second Stride, and Kyle can fill us in with some details about Multitasker as well. I'll trade you. Just tell her. So how long has Lady been in the program with you?
She got in last October.
Okay.
Okay.
How long did you kind of start riding right away? What would the process look like for you?
We do a vet check when they first come in, and the vet determines whether they're rideable. and then if they're rideable, we get on them right away. He tells us, Dr. Beckman's the one that we use, he tells us what level he thinks they're going to be capable of doing, and then we just get on them, and they get ridden 2 to 3 times a week. And then with her, it was just walking at first. She wasn't sound at a trot, and so it just took a while, and she wasn't in as good a shape as she is now. So just got some groceries into her and some attention, and then gradually the more she got comfortable and with the footing in the arena that we have versus outside in the mud or whatever it was, just letting her find her footing, because she hadn't been ridden since probably she was 3 years old, and she was 19. So it just takes a while for them to get used to it again. They're a little apprehensive. They don't know, they remember being ridden, but they don't remember much, and she'd just been kicked out in the field for 10 years. So.
Can you tell us a little bit about kind of how she adjusted to being handled more frequently and having a little bit more of a routine? Is she a good individual around the barn to handle? I mean, here today, she is definitely being exposed to quite a bit, and it seems very sensible.
She was a little more flighty when she first came in, snorting and looking at stuff, but no real big moves. Like, she was like, okay, this is my next job, whatever it is. And she's just she's very calm. Yeah, and nice to work around everybody. I mean, Kate back at Second Stride is probably her favorite horse. She's nicknamed her Ladybug. So she loves to go out, roll in the mud, and get as dirty as possible. So, but no, she's easily handled. The boys take them in and out 2 or 3 at a time and just put them in there, lead ropes, and she got used to a mounting block like 2 times. Walk right up and just stand like a rock. You can climb up on her, and so she's great.
Were you provided with any medical history from the owner? Are you aware of any limitations or injuries from the track or anything like that?
No, she's got some cellulitis on the back there, like just came in, I don't know, they call it dew poisoning or something like that we've been working on, and we can't seem to get rid of it completely. But she's not, one thing that is nice for a trail horse, she's not overly ambitious. So she's not going to try to gallop off on you or anything else like that. So usually I just walk her for 5 or 10 minutes, then do some light jogging, and then take her for a hack around the farm. That's what she likes to do.
What do you think the ideal adoption situation for Lady is going to be?
I really think somebody that's already got a horse or 2 and just wants a companion, and somebody that can go trail riding, like have their husband hop on a horse and go trail riding with them, that sort of thing. She's an easy keeper, and very calm under tack. So I think that it would be perfect if she could go someplace where they just wanted another horse that could be lightly ridden and a companion for the horses that they have.
Docs, any questions before we move on to our other mare here? Okay, we'll give her a little bit of a break to move around more. Okay, and this is multitasker. So this is her first day meeting Kyle. It's her first day doing a lot of things. And again, as you can see, she's doing quite well. Kyle, can you give us a little bit of the history of what you know? It sounds like you're just meeting her for the first time, and then she's going to go back to the farm with you after this.
Well, no, she's not coming back to our farm after this. She's going back to her bloodstock agent farm. But I'm joking that maybe she would. Multitasker, just met her when she came off the trailer today, when her farm manager brought her over for us. And we reached her current owner reached out to us a couple weeks ago and just said, hey, I'm looking to pension this mare from breeding. Can you help us with placements? That's one of the things we do, is we like to help network horses into a home. We don't have room at our farm right now, although I joke that I can always take more. But so we said, yes, we'll help network. And this was just an opportunity for us to get her out and get some exposure. But this is legitimately possibly her first day ever in an indoor arena, although she's been through sales. So she's been in high energy environments in her life. She's had a very standard thoroughbred broodmare career, in the sense of she raced, like Kirsten said, she went on and had, 14 years of foaling seasons, lived on a farm, went through multiple owners. Her current owner got her just before she had her 2023 foal. So she's had a few different owners during her breeding career, but so she's had pretty standard that way. Exposure-wise, her only times probably off the farm in the last 2 years have been to go to the breeding shed, and then, or if she had to go to clinic for something, but breeding shed and then back to the farm out in the field. So yeah, I'm extremely happy with how, she's obviously more looky, than Lady in the sense of the speakers are new. There's things that are a little bit she hasn't seen in a while. But having gone through a sales ring, she's going to have a little bit more of a, hey, loudspeakers and audiences are a little bit more normal for her, but it also could trigger that was a stressful event for me, and so therefore I'm going to be a little more up. So just that's all basically I know.
Yeah, it looks like her history says that immediately upon retirement, she went through the sale at Barrett's, and I think maybe 3 or 4 years later, they might have tried to put her through Facing Tipton, and she RNA'd at that sale. So she spent the majority of her career with the same owner, and only recently changed hands twice, I think. Were you made aware of any like veterinary history, any injuries on the track, any like traumatic labors or anything like that? She's had 9, and she's been covered every year since 2011. So
I was told she's just sound. That's what I was told. So that's usually how we find out. We usually get them and oh yeah, they're sound. They're great. Obviously when, we get them, then we evaluate them, but no, I don't have any history on her. Yeah.
All right, docs, any questions? Okay,
I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit more.
Jump into it.
Because I think it's going to be super helpful. First, we'll come this way, and I know you gave a history of myself, but I'm excited to be here for a couple different reasons because I have an extra big soft spot for mares because I'm sorry, you cannot rival the work ethic of a good mare. So I have some geldings in my herd that give me a little bit tougher of a time getting some jobs done than my mares. My mares are just the opposite. It's like put me in coach when, where, The biggest thing is keeping their mind occupied so they don't worry about what you're going to ask for them next. So I guess my question for you would be, what did you see her biggest challenge being as you were transitioning her in October to going under saddle?
Just she hadn't been ridden in so long, and she was like, you go to put the tack on for the first time, and she's, what are you doing? But she accepted it, that was the best part. And picking up the feet, just the handling. She hadn't been handled in so long. And then when you got into the arena, a little, everything that's unknown. Like we changed the arena, like a couple months ago, we redid the whole thing. And her first time in there, she was like snorting and, but it's just one time around and then she's good again. I mean, I just think her age would be the only limitation. So she wasn't sound at a jog when we first did start riding her. She was sound at a walk, pick up a jog, I think behind, just had.
How much did her feet contribute? Because I'm guessing with that time frame out, essentially pensioned for a bit, maybe that was a strong transition for. She's in front shoes now. I presume that's come in real handy with our nice 2 months of no rain and fly season. But
the stomping and yes, yeah. No, her feet were in terrible shape when she first came in. I actually went, that's my job as a hold for the farrier every Tuesday. So I was like, how is she even standing on those feet? But getting her shot up front and then just letting her get comfortable. And then once she couple cycles of the shoeing and the steady walking, and then asked her to pick up a jog. She went right on into it, ears up, happy to do it. So, and then going outside, she's like a rock. You can just take her anywhere. We border a house that has a couple of dogs that every time they see a horse out in the field, they come running, barking up to the fence, and a lot of horses will spook from that. She's
not even phaser.
No.
And then can you speak to like her top line? Now I presume when she first came in, and they're both in great condition, but certainly now some of us might even look at her and not immediately think that she's the older of the two. She looks very good for a 20-year-old. And that mare looks great, yet her top line's a little leaner. She has a more prominent spine showing up, but she's put how much energy and groceries into growing 9 foals, was it? 9 foals? So she's had essentially a decade of growing babies. So she's put a lot into them. Now, she had 3 foals, this mare?
2. She's had 3 covers.
She's had 3 times, yeah. So Can you say anything about how her top line was when she first came?
When she first came in, did not look as good as this. You know, she was, and then they get turned out half a day. Every horse gets turned out. So as she got comfortable and she's running out in the field and that's getting the groceries and that stuff, it's kind of built up, plus the exercise. If you can put some jogging into them, that really helps.
Well, and I think, and one of the reasons I'm asking you some of these questions is leading up to a little bit of a discussion. So I think one of the biggest misnomers, so yes, I'm a veterinarian, but my background is specifically chiropractic and acupuncture. That's what my predominant focus has been for my veterinary career over the last 15 years. And so one thing I see, whether they're 5 years old or even in this demographic and they're coming into a home where they're starting to be ridden, coming off the track, transitioning of any kind, whether it's straight off the track or in this case straight out of the field, is that we might see a top line that's leaner like that. And you know, there's been a focus in training where you're gonna improve the top line muscle, and there's a little bit of a misnomer in that we're going to do that all with exercise. You said groceries. I kind of like, it's a big, if they don't have the mass to turn into muscle, then you're already behind the 8 ball. And what you're describing, and she can go ahead and take a walk for a second for her brain, but what you're describing is a fabulous point too, because you did what I call the Silver Sneakers program, right? So it is a very consistent, low impact transitional period where now you were doing it as much for the behavior and the training portion, you know, getting her acclimated to being handled again, but it was also in turn doing exactly what her body needed. I think, you know, again, the other misconception is that you need to do the faster gaits to get something done with their body. But that is amazing what you can do at the walk. And I'm sure anybody who works at the Spy Coast Rehab Center over here that has put horses back into work and under tack, they can tell you how much of the early time is spent even just walking. And you can do that in collection or learning, teaching them how to stretch down and out, and you can start to get the bend, because I'm guessing after that amount of time in a field, if we could put it in human terms, she would have had a hard time touching her toes. So she probably would have needed to have a few yoga sessions.
Exactly.
So
Stretch and get comfortable under tack. Exactly. Get used to, like, okay, now I've got to carry this weight, not just myself. I'm not just picking around for myself. I've got to carry this person, and I've got to redistribute my weight accordingly, and get comfortable with it and get some decent feet.
yeah, exactly. Yep.
No,
So
but
that's
even with, I gallop racehorses, and when they first come back off of an injury, all you do is tack walk them.
Yep.
You just walk them.
Yep.
You know.
I'm going to let her have a break, and we'll bounce back and forth a little bit.
Okay, we're going to call her Task today. So Task is pretty much your classic broodmare. She's been spending her life having babies for the most part. And she's 18 years old, and she's had 9 foals. So she has lived in a situation on a farm, probably in a herd with multiple other broodmares. Their day-to-day life consists of coming in, eating, maybe they just get fed out in the field twice a day. When they're getting their reproductive work done, they're put in the stall with a bud out of the door and a twitch. And it's not really much of a life to build a relationship with a person. So I think with a broodmare like this, that the biggest thing is to earn her trust. And she seems like a very sweet mare, and I think with the right person and just spending time with her and letting her learn that she can trust people again. She's going to have somebody who is going to feed her carrots, somebody who's going to love on her, pet on her. You're not going to always stick an arm up her rear end and put a twitch on her. So with that being said, I think that would be a really good place to start with this girl. I think with the younger mares that come out of the broodmare program, like a mare that maybe has been bred a couple times after she got done with her racing career, and she's got some reproductive issues, so she actually can't get in foal. And you learn about that early on. So you're looking at a mare that's like 6 or 7. That mare is going to remember her life at the racetrack, remember her groom. She's going to remember what it's like to be ridden every day and going out and being happy. And so that mare is going to take a lot less time and effort to get going again. I think this girl, she probably is going to need some time to get used to just being handled again, probably taken out a lot of groundwork. I think being in a situation like this today is great for her, so she can see things. She's happy, it's safe, she feels safe. And I think starting with like ground poles, I like to just throw ground poles out on the ground, and you can take them through that in hand. And I think once you get to the point where she's accepting a saddle, that it's great to just walk around. Like Lark said, I think that just spending a lot of time with these girls, just walking, getting them used to leg, getting them used to just commands, listening to you, period. So with her, I do agree that with her top line, she's a little dropped off. She's got kind of this hump here in her lumbosacral area. And so I think that it'll be really important to have good saddle fit with her, and probably getting a saddle fitter in would be helpful, and just spending some time to just, maybe start with a surcingle and some lunging and with pads, and then work towards getting a saddle on her. What I like about this mare is right here. I mean, she's ready to fall asleep with us working with her, but she's got great feet. She has no white on her. I love that in a horse that's going to be turned out. So she's not going to be prone to a lot of dew poisoning. She is barefoot, and even in spite of all the ground, the hard ground that we've had lately, she still has a pretty good, nice round foot, and it seems like feet shouldn't be much of an issue. I do think that with the broodmares, two of the limiting factors for a broodmare in a broodmare herd are feet. Trying to keep a lot of these white-footed horses, the mares that get heavy in foal, they tend to get splayed out platter feet, and they get flat feet, they get sore. They're hard to keep shoes on. You have to keep shoes on them. So feet are a really big issue. And the other issue with the brood mares, the older mares, is stifle issues. So I think a lot of that comes from, in addition to the wear and tear of being on the racetrack, to the wear and tear of just having multiple foal after foal. So, looking at a mare of this age, you're obviously not going to do a major pre-purchase exam on her. You want to know, is she sound at the walk and at the trot, or fairly sound? Does she have any lumpy joints, old arthritic joints? And she's really clean-legged. I really like that about her. I don't see anything that really makes me question her soundness. And also looking in her mouth, looking at her teeth. She probably hasn't had her teeth done a whole lot, but I would guess she's had her teeth done every couple years, or you probably don't know, do you, about her? Yeah. So, but she's got a good mouth on her, and I really like her body condition. So I think that there's definitely a lot to work with here, especially her mind.
Dr. Nieman, can you tell us, in your experience at WinStar and managing broodmares, when you have a mare like Task, as we're calling her, that's had a pretty consistent reproductive career, like how do you kind of make the decision to look at winding down and pensioning a mare as she's getting a little bit on in years like this? Like, what are the kind of benchmarks that you might be looking at and making that decision?
I think that the mares will tell us that on their own a lot of times. You'll have a mare that maybe gets in foal the first 5 years, one cover, she has her baby, it goes great, she gets right back in foal under 30-day heat, and everything is good. And then over time, she becomes a little bit harder and harder to get in foal. She's chronically dirty. Maybe she has a dystocia, she has a cervical tear from a dystocia. I think too, when they get low in the back, they tend to pool urine and their uterus gets pulled down and forward. And so they carry a lot of fluid in their uterus, and it becomes harder and harder to clean them up, so to say, so that they get back in full. So I think that from the economic factor of that, how many times do you want to cover her in a season? If she's a one cover mare, she's probably costing you about $700-800 worth of veterinary reproductive work to get her bred. If she's multiple covers, she could end up costing you $15,000 to $20,000 just in one season to get her in full. So I think a lot of times the economic factor is what comes into play. And I would say that most mares, by the time that they're 20, are pretty much retired out of the herd. Sometimes you'll see a mare 21, 22, but those are usually Hail Marys.
A question for both of you. We were with Dr. Wolfsdorf this morning and talking about reproductive procedures and events and that sort of thing. And we did talk about, kind of the trauma of having a C-section or a dystocia, or, in a mare that is experiencing urine pulling, like kind of how that really manifests for them physically, and kind of a little bit of the running joke that the ovaries get blamed for everything. Can you talk a little bit about how those things, you have the foremost problem of, we have had a C-section and cut through the abdomen, or, we have a very real issue with urine pooling, but kind of how does that play into the overall physical picture for a mare?
Okay, my wheelhouse is totally different. I can speak on kind of the aftermath of that, but you're up on the on the internal med repro part of that.
I think the contrast here will be good, though, because I think that's what people, one big thing that we need to dispel, right, is
for sure.
what is a problem, quote unquote, and what isn't.
Well, and I almost don't like to use the word problem as much as it is, the level of maintenance. Everybody's got a thing. Everybody does, straight off the track, maybe they've got body soreness, maybe they've got some bone bruising, maybe they, so they need time mentally or physically for another reason. These guys need time for a different kind of physical reason. So what you're talking about, I'll just speak real quick on that is I look at this mare who we don't, she has no known surgical history, C-section or anything, but just mechanically, this mare has experienced live cover, which is nothing to shake your hat at, right? Live cover is an event. Anybody who's been in a breeding shed to watch that maneuvering would know that that's not, especially a mare who has carried many foals. It changes the whole from a biomechanical standpoint. My eyeballs see what is happening to the pelvis, to the top line, to the sacrum, and the pelvic ligaments, if you would. So there's a giant sacrotuberous ligament that is involved here. The dynamics that it goes through as a mare moves through parturition and foaling, and then what it does on the other side, rebounding, is is dramatic in an amazing way to make it affordable for them to have a foal, but it does change the whole mechanics of their hind end. So I see that as one of those transitional things you have to be super, super mindful if you're asking one of these ladies to go back into an athletic career. You know, they may be just slotted for a companion situation or a low impact athletic career. We can talk about the scenario if you've got a different type of mare that may have a younger eventing or jumping career. But even for these guys, just what that does to the orientation of their pelvis, what that means for their whole posture. So for instance, when you're looking at a mare that has what you're talking about, that kind of change to their whole croup where they kind of flatten and their uterus comes forward and they have the urine pulling, that changes their whole posture behind. They tend to trail their hind end behind. And it creates a weakness and a mechanical inefficiency, if you would. They tend to be heavier on their front end. If they don't have great feet, that can even compound something like that. And it's not that it's a showstopper. You just have to be prepared for what that maintenance would look like for that horse. You know, if that's the horse that you're going to take on and commit to, then it's in your budget to make sure that this mare is going to wear shoes. You know, it's in your budget and time to have to condition her in a way that's going to help with that core strength. I mean, I'm going to be biased and say she for sure needs adjusted, the pelvis and everything. But it does make a big difference. Like I've had horses that are broodmare prospects that are transitioning for the RRP, and one of the biggest complaints I get not complaints, but the biggest training hurdle I hear from people that are bringing these mares into that event or that arena is, you know, trying to get them strong behind, or big thing is transitioning from trot to canter and canter work and keeping a lead behind and not swapping off leads behind, not cross-firing and things. But the mechanics that it takes for that sacropelvis to maneuver in a way to make that a comfortable gait and a strong gait it's not going to be readily available, especially if that pelvis is tipped forward. So those are horses that, you know, obviously on my end, I'm seeing them, I'm adjusting them, they're getting adjusted, that may be in a routine, but also what we're talking about is doing a lot of transitions with these horses. So you're doing a lot of trot to walk especially down transitions where you can get them back on their hind end. You know, you had already talked about ground poles helping with their core strength. Doing backing exercises. And then there's other ways to help them create that motion and that orientation through their pelvis. Now the mares that I have seen post-surgeries, the other thing is, again, anybody who's seen any horse go through any surgery and or recovery from that surgery, that's not a whole scenario that's for the faint of heart either. That's kind of a big event for their bodies to come through. So how you manage them on the other side, whether it's from day one after that surgery or you have it as their history and how you're going to manage them beyond that, that's another consideration. But then back to the internal medicine, repro part of it, what do you think they need to know?
Well, I think, so if we're talking about a C-section, they've got an abdominal midline incision. And we have at WinStar, we'll get a lot of horses who've come in from colic surgeries. I'm talking young horses, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds. And our standard is kind of 60 days before they can go back into training. So, and we're talking galloping, breezing, racing. So obviously at 60 days, you're kind of starting back, you're jogging for a bit, you're building muscle to canter. So it's not the incision that's really holding you back at that point, it's the loss of fitness. So with a broodmare who's had a C-section, I think as long as you're past your 60-day point, you really should have no problems at all. You know, there's the occasional incision that has some herniation or whatnot, but for the most part, I would not have any qualms about taking a mare with a C-section. As far as, I'm sure Karen talked about urine pooling, and some of these mares, they get retired because they're chronic urine poolers. So they maybe have had a urethral extension or 2 or 3 or 4, and so they're chronically have urine scalding down the insides of their hind legs. I have actually one mare that is retired. This is my personal mare, and she is exactly what we're talking about today. She's 12 years old. She lives out in the field with another retired mare that we have that's 15, and honestly, I don't have the strength anymore to want to get on her, but her back is completely flat across. You know, this mare has a nice dip in her back, like, you know, it's like valleys and mountains there. This mare, she goes straight across her croup, and she is constantly has urine scalding down the insides of her legs. So if she had a little bit better top line, better conformation, I think she would be a great horse to be used for a second career. And so if I was going to take her and do that, I think she would be one that I would probably have to do a course of SMZs every so often and just try to keep her cleaned up. And she lets you know when she's uncomfortable. You know, she swishes her tail. You've always got to wash her tail out and keep it clean, and you can use Vaseline between their hind legs. So that would be that type of an issue. And then the other thing is with any mare is those mares that are constantly in heat. So there's a couple ways to deal with that. Regimate, keep them on Regimate. And then I have zero experience with this because my job is not to keep them out of heat, it's to bring them into heat. But the glass balls to put into the uterus, a lot of show hunters, you might know more about that, Lark, but they, you can put the balls into their uterus, and so what it does is it simulates a pregnancy, and so they think they're pregnant and they don't come into heat.
How many people know about the marble insertion? Has there
Dr. WinStar
Okay,
covered it this
super,
morning,
good.
yeah.
Does that answer your question? Did you have more questions?
Yeah, I
on
think that was great.
Okay.
What would you guys like to see next from these mares?
Well, I'm going to just add one thing because obviously, because it's on the same subject, is like obviously one of the main reasons someone calls me out is their horse's back sore. What is something to put on the radar when you have a back sore mare is anything that is related to urogenital discomfort. So there can be a back sore mare that may not have anything to do with the actual spinal mechanics as much as it does, because you were talking about your mare tells you when she's uncomfortable. And it may be behavioral, but sometimes it's even under palpation. So like I will get these horses in front of me, these mares in front of me that actually have really good mechanics to those spinal segments, meaning that lumbar region, everything behind that rib cage. But is actually directly linked to their urogenital health or unhealth, say. And so some of those mares say that they suck wind or they do. So she would have gone over Catholics and things like that. And so and it's not to, again, not to humanize it, but it's not too far off the mark from what a human can explain to you, that you may have lower back pain that has nothing to do with your spinal mechanics as it does something that's visceral, which would be a urogenital system. So that is something to keep on the radar when you have a back sore mare. How is it mechanics or is it visceral? So I think that is just something to add to that scene.
You know, along those lines, actually, can we walk her over here and let's talk about Catholics for a second, because I think it was this mare. One of these mares sucked wind.
It is her, yes.
Yeah. So, and that's something too, if they're sucking air, they can pull air into their uterus, and that makes them uncomfortable. It makes them dirty. it contributes to
They
all the
get
things we
back
just
sore.
talked about. So if you could just point her head towards the door, and we're going to look.
We're
at the rear
flashing her.
end.
We're
So-
flashing the audience. Where's that camera? No.
Okay, you can this side with me, okay.
Good girl, Mama.
She says, "Oh no."
She's like, oh, I know this scene.
Okay, so I don't know if you guys can see, but see her vulva, the bottom half of it straight up and down, the top half kind of leans inwards. You know, it's at this angle, and then it goes down like this. So she is one that this would be a really good reason to keep her caslicked if she was still in the reproductive herd. And it also is contributing to her sucking air. She is not caslicked right now. She's probably gonna, is she okay, you think? Maybe? Okay, I don't know if you guys can see this, but I can separate that out. So what she really needs and would help her a lot is the caslicks. And so they will suture the lips of the vulva together about halfway down to where, so she still can urinate effectively, but it eliminates that shelf. And so that will eliminate the wind sucking.
And what
for
I've
her.
seen with these guys too, and you can correct me or contribute either way, is I have seen that be recommended and be done, and it does help them put that top line mass on. Any discomfort through that, your genitals, or anything that is pulling energy from the body, it is a big energy drain on a body to have a chronic low-grade infection. So if they have low-grade inflammation or to the point of infection, like if she's sucking wind and having urine pulling, it can drain some of their resources and their calories. So, you know, where she doesn't have the fullest top line, that may be a contributing factor. That is something to put on the radar if you're bringing one of these ladies home and in her instance doesn't have a Caslicks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, that would be great.
Yep. Yeah. And it's pretty blatant for her.
If you've never heard it, you'll know what it is, and it's pretty obvious. You usually need to look under the tail by that point.
Come on, Mama. It was there.
Just a little bit.
Go ahead, be obscene, Mama. Go ahead. We fixed her just by talking about it. It's great. I know.
Is it for those of you watching from home, is it the kind of a little bit of a clapping sound almost?
She does look sound.
I know. She's
nice
actually
shot on her.
lovely.
Yeah.
What a sweetheart.
Yeah.
You guys here in the audience, any questions so far? I think we're going to look at the move a little bit more and that sort of thing, but we've covered a lot of ground. Does anybody have any questions? All right, carry on.
I have one more side step.
Okay.
Can I? Yeah. So I want to kind of refocus on one thing you said earlier, because I think it's super, super valuable to bring to everybody's attention again. Now, you said her perfect scenario would involve what two things?
A companion horse and some light exercise.
Okay, so we talked about the light exercise. The companion horse, I think, is something that not everybody understands what that is. You know, it may be just the lonely soul in the backyard that needs a friend. How many have just that little bit naughty something that could use maybe right?
Yes.
And so I am saying this because I have this demographic. I have a 19-year-old off-the-track broodmare that was, and this is a great scenario to talk about. The owner's breeders had decided that she retired off the racetrack because she had chronic EIPH. She was a bleeder. And so it was becoming harder and harder to control that instance. But she retired sound, very athletic mare, big, beautiful, big doe-eyed thing like this mare. And so I assumed her, and she came into eventing, a lot of fun. I miss her terrible from that end. She had a field injury that was kind of no fault of her own. It created a pastern injury that could be managed, but it was going to be harder to manage at a higher level eventing. So actually, she became a broodmare to some warm blood mixed babies, 2 of them that are jumpers, and now she's totally retired. And her biggest job, and one she should be very proud of, is that I have a gelding who was gelded late, and he was not very polite when you would put him out with a buddy. He would graze nose to nose with that buddy, and then 2 days later might decide that he wants to put that buddy on the other side of the fence in a not so polite manner. And I will tell you, the one that taught him that that's inappropriate social behavior was this mare. You know, she went out with him and she gave him the what for, and he has never had a problem being turned out with others again. It's very common that some of these mares make good companions to a group of weanlings, for instance. You know, like they help keep a group of young horses from running through the fence when, you know, the neighbor decides to shoot off fireworks, you know, or, you know, like, so these mares can be, yes, the new best friend to the lonely, yeah, but they're great babysitters. They can put manners on one. They can also teach them appropriate social behaviors. They also can teach them sensibility, you know, like this is not something to jump a fence for, you know, and when the humans are coming up at around 3:30, that means it's dinner time and we should all walk to the fence, you know, so like they teach them amazing skills that they would not understand in other scenes. So I think that's why I wanted to circle back to it, because I think it's one of those kind of underrated qualities that only this demographic, or predominantly this demographic, has. And it's an untapped resource in a lot of people's backyards or different herd situations. So that was one thing that I thought would be good to bring to everybody's attention.
I think that's such a great point, and something that as we've been preparing for this and trying to get across the point of like, okay, there will be some mares where it is appropriate for them to go back into some level of riding activity. And what the tricky thing is when we have mares like this who are, you know, the more advanced age, are not going to be good candidates for, you know, significant amounts of riding and that sort of thing. And so, but that doesn't mean that we still have to figure out some place for them to go and you know, what that's going to look like for them as they, you know, live the latter part of their life. And as just kind of psychologically as people, we expect that there's going to be some kind of utility that comes with a horse, that like we're going to be able to ride them, or they should be rideable, like even if it's just minimal. But I think that what you're saying is displaying like, here's this value that, you know, kind of in a social setting, and the value that the mare can bring to a herd environment, and she can still be incredibly useful and valuable that way in terms of kind of maintaining order around the farm.
There's a couple other outlets as well. One would be the chemically induced nurse mare. That's becoming a much more popular thing. So, you know, a lot of times when, say this mare had a baby, for whatever reason, she can't raise the baby. Maybe she had colic surgery, maybe she doesn't have enough milk, maybe she's got some aggression towards the foal. So we have to get a nurse mare in a situation like that. And a lot of times in the past, we've always had mares, nurse mare farms, so they will breed the mare, they will foal out the mare, and then they will take that baby and bucket feed the baby, and then that mare becomes the new mom for this mare's baby. So what has become more popular is hormonally inducing these mares to lactate. And those mares actually are doing quite well. So a farm will have, say, a herd of several horses, and they kind of put them on a schedule so that you can call and, hey, we need a nurse mare today, the mare just died, and they'll bring her straight out to you. But a lot of their mares are kind of retired brood mares, and whether they were the reproductive issue mare or maybe a mare that just didn't have enough pedigree or race record to breed. And so that is one outlet. Another outlet that I've recently learned about, and I have not actually had to call them yet or use them, but the quarter horses, they can have multiple foals in a year, so they'll flush the embryos. So those embryos need a recipient mare to carry the baby. So they are actually, there's some quarter horse farms, like the 4-6s in Texas, but they're looking for kind of youngish thoroughbred mares that, maybe she's got blocked oviducts and she can't actually get pregnant, but there's nothing wrong with her uterus and no reason she can't carry a baby. So they can put that embryo in her and she can still be a mom. So those are a couple other outlets in addition. And then I think, too, you talked about companions for other horses, but I think companions for people. Like there's a Wounded Warrior Project, and just a lonely person who really needs a pet, and, dogs just aren't cutting it. They want to put something out in their pasture, so.
Those kind of programs like Wounded Warrior, but the therapeutic, not necessarily riding, but the mental health programs that there's a lot for, and even corporate groups that they use to learn a lot. Do you want to talk? Something to say? No, you want to eat it. She probably would bite it. But I think that's another great outlet for those mares to be like, they usually are very social. They're usually fairly level-headed. I mean, some of them, they're pretty good-minded usually once they get settled into a routine and they know where they are. So I think those are always great options too for those mares. Equine assisted therapy. That's the one my brain was not working. Thank you, Neil.
And then I don't know if it's okay. I was just thinking, this is specifically a training session. This is one of the reasons why I came here. Into the arena with these two lovely models. But I think one thing that we should keep in mind, that training isn't just about how do we get a saddle on them and how we put them back into work, be it meandering around the farm or over fences, because from someone who has been on the backside as an exercise rider with them, being a veterinarian working around them, and then having my own animals that have entered the sport horse world, to see what that transition looks like. I think we've done a great job educationally about talking about what that transition looks like, what their life looks like on the track, and then how we transition that to, trailering in a 2-horse side-by-side trailer, not a box stall. Looks like, putting them in the center aisle on cross ties. These horses have never seen cross ties up to this point. Getting them to tie to the side of the trailer. This is still all things like you were saying, both of you, these mares trailered here just fine. And that mare's probably seen a trailer more than this one, even though this one hasn't been quote unquote because she's been back and forth to the breeding shed for a decade, so she's seen that and is probably okay with that. But one thing she may or may not be, and it looks like she's fine, is being away from the herd. Like if we think about what these mares are, the social situations they're coming from right now, it was probably a transition for them to come off the track and learn to live outside 24/7, except for when they're up in, to be palpated or to eat a meal.
It's a really good point about being away from the herd, because actually part of the reason we don't have one of our herd here is because I was terrified they would just be screaming the whole time they were here, right? So there's a part of, and finding brood mares to come, it's one of those where, well, what are we going to put them out of the field, and they're not really ready to go out, or they're going to be stressed. So having a mare like this is great, because I would expect them to be screaming, "Where's my friends?" Oh my gosh, she got here first by herself, went in a stall and just stood there, and she's going to probably bite me one of these times. But she really does like people, But yeah, no, but that's a really good point about that herd-bound mentality can be so more ingrained. It takes longer for them to adjust from that.
Yeah, and it's not a transition that is unsurmountable, but it's one that needs to be planned for. What's your game plan? What's your game plan? Like, and I don't know, can you speak for what is this mare's routine? Is she out 24/7? Does she have stall time, or how did she manage with that?
Okay, at Second Stride, the horses are either out from 8 to 2 or 3 till 7. So they're on one schedule or the other, because a lot of times we use the stall for 2 horses just because we have so many. So yes, they get a half a day outside, either in the morning or in the evening. And when she came in, she formed an attachment to another broodmare that she was right next door to, and we ended up having to split them up because we're not going to get one person to adopt both of them together. So you have to let them find new friends. You have to kick them out in the field with somebody else, and they form a bond with that group of horses. They are quite adaptable in that respect. But
it's a transition that you have to plan for, because I'm guessing if this mare had been out in the back 40 for how many years, 5 plus 6, 8, 10, like if she
9.
had been, and then all of a sudden you're saying, okay, your new routine is that you're only going out for this window. How are you going to handle that?
Right.
And
and some of them will do
and
stall walking, and it takes them a while to get used to a new routine. And
so I think this is a great platform to bring that up in the training session, is that part of the training is how do we get them adapted to a new routine? Because if their routine is, I'm used to being kicked out 24/7, or only to come in for, vaccines, a trim here and there, and then there's a whole different scenario. And again, probably never seen cross ties. How do we do that? Like on my farm, I have the luxury of having horses that have kind of been through. So I have horses, if one is learning the cross ties for the first time, they're learning it on the back cross ties, while I have a seasoned horse in the front cross ties. So everybody, so there's a kind of a show and tell. It's the same tied to a trailer. There's a show and tell. I've got one that is old hat for, and one who may not understand the program. And it's amazing how that, now if you don't have that situation, it's a different kind of transition, but still something to plan for, particularly with this demographic that, like we already alluded to, is that they may or may not have had any chance to bond with a human, and or they may not have had a lot of handling, quote unquote, in the sense that, I'm gonna pick your feet every day, you're gonna come in and eat a meal in the stall twice a day, maybe 3 times if we've got to put groceries on you. That's the other thing, is when we're putting groceries on these guys, like that has to come into play, and how they're handling the weather. These guys, it's just all part of the transition and part of the training, if you would. So we can talk all day about how we're going to get the saddle on them and how we're going to get them over the poles, but there's a lot that happens, the other 90% of the time.
So what do you guys, if I'm an aftercare organization or just a private individual, and I've had a broodmare come into my possession that's, fairly recently retired from a breeding program, what does the first 90 days look like for me? Like, how am I planning that out in a way that is, considerate and compassionate for, what abrupt a transition this is going to feel like? When it comes to ramping up the physical activity, like how might you plot that out? What would you look for? Like, okay, we can progress a little bit more here, or we need to take a pause and spend some more time on this piece. We talked quite a bit about, Catherine was very good about assessing nutritional intake as you're ramping up activity level and how frequently to check on that piece. Just a rough idea. I know this could look wildly different on a case-by-case basis.
I think that the first 90 days of acquiring a broodmare, probably the most important thing is to develop that relationship. I think bring her in, turn her out, bring her into the barn, tie her to the wall, tie her in the cross ties, groom her, pick her feet, get her used to being just handled every day, give her a bath, take her out and maybe just like driver, long lines. I love to use long lines on a horse. I think take it back down to ground zero, to as if you were re-breaking her, especially if she's a mare that's been in a program for a long time. If it's only been a couple years since she was last ridden and she still is athletic and looks great, I don't think it's really much of a difference than it would be taking a gelding off the track. But I think that just developing the ground manners would be the most important thing. You know, putting the halter off and on, letting them realize that every time you touch their nose, you're not going to stick a twitch on them.
And I think we were talking about this earlier. You know, again, this may be a luxury, or it may be a scenario that you can work out. Like, just say this mare, you know, is gonna be geared to doing a trail riding home, and we're talking about getting her moving again, and you know, that's a great point where you can long line her and get just as you, but she may be one. I know you mentioned, okay, I want you to re-mention what you said her thing was that she wasn't real good about doing.
She's settled a lot since she's been here now, but I think her mentality is not very forward. So she tends to, when she first came in today, just getting her into the stall area took a second to think things through, and I didn't want to go, there was no forward, right? So forward was really hard. Yep, she was balking at things, and when she was out here just going through the banners just now, that's an improvement from what she earlier was like balking at them completely.
So I was saying that what would be fabulous to do with her is I have a candidate, I would pony her. You know, I have a buddy, I've got a great horse that I can pony another horse off of, and that would be fabulous for her because it would take no pressure on her top line. It would give her a friend to kind of show her the ropes about going forward. It would get her into that Silver Sneakers program, low impact, consistent work without a lot of pressure. So if she's amicable to ponying, that can help with something like balking, for instance. So it's, again, having a more seasoned friend holding the hand and going forward. So I think that's a fabulous training technique if you do have the luxury of having another horse. If not, you know, all the things you were mentioning where you are her buddy, showing her that it's okay to go forward. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty obvious, like just watching you walk through the banners here. You know, she's settled down. She knows that, yeah, that's her person today.
Yep.
And, you know, I bet you wouldn't have much trouble walking through a lot of the facilities right now. She seems pretty comfortable, pretty quiet.
I think sometimes, like in sport horse life in particular, we get, you know, very fixated on, you know, learning for the test, right? Mm-hmm. And it's very easy to kind of overlook the part of like, there's value in just going places and just experiencing things together. Like, just for these guys here today, they weren't that up coming in here. Like, we could have had a completely different situation this afternoon. We've gotten two very good individuals, but even just in the time where they're here with a trusted partner and they're being exposed to some stuff that is unfamiliar, and we've been here for 45 minutes or something, and the demeanor just in that time of just hanging out and not having much expectation, just observing and taking things in really has a lot of value for these horses, I think.
And I think another thing that I see often, and it's not necessarily isolated to this demographic, as any of these guys coming off the track, I go, your first 3 field trips might be totally uneventful, and you may be prepared to give them all the gold stars of any horse you've taken off the track, and then you take them on the 4th field trip, and all of a sudden, you know, they are pulling off the trailer, they're, you know, blowing up and snorting at things, and I think it's important for people to know that just the more field trips you do, and if you have that blip it on the radar, you just never know what that one thing was that set them off. I mean, for me, I had a horse that I trailered all over, and I thought she is 100% ready for the horse park experience. And then there was the quarter horse show going on, and the lunging and the whip snack, and we had a come apart. But then our next trip to the horse park with the same scenario was totally different. So I love that you mentioned all the field trips, because that's what these guys just do, and you just do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again.
And it doesn't have to be like result or goal oriented, just the act of being out and being present.
No, good girl. Kyle, I think we found your mama horse.
Oh, I've got so many of these.
But she likes you.
They all like me.
I had a couple thoughts too I wanted to mention just on broodmares in general. But mares that are in foal, like, you can ride them through their second trimester, and they're perfectly athletic. There's many horses that race, and I don't know how many times I've heard about that odd mare that suddenly they find a baby in the stall at the racetrack. You're not really sure what happened, but something definitely happened there. And then also, as far as a mare who has a foal by her side, I used to ride polo ponies for a guy, and one of the ponies that I rode was a thoroughbred mare, and she had a thoroughbred baby they paid a pretty decent stud fee for by her side. So this mare was like 2-3 careers on her third career, and she was actively playing polo, and we would leave the baby in the stall while we rode her, and they had come to terms with the fact that mom's going to leave for an hour, but she'll be back, and mare was fine with it. And then we'd go out and hack around, and the baby would just kind of run along with us. So there really is no reason to think that, motherhood and being pregnant is going to affect what they do day to day.
Well, I think, any final thoughts here? We're kind of winding down to like bus pickup time and dinner time and afternoon activities. Any parting words for the group? Any questions that have come up from the group?
Are there any scenarios that someone can think of that they would like to brainstorm or talk about? Like, do you have an off-the-track thoroughbred broodmare experience that we haven't touched on? We've talked. I mean, I know this is the over 15 demographic here, but I think we've kind of pulled in some scenarios that would involve the younger demographics and transitioning them, what it would look like if they've had foals before versus haven't had foals, or weren't, that wasn't their lot in life to get pregnant. So, because that looks a little different, from a body standpoint, and a transition standpoint. Okay.
Dr. Nieman, you good? Any final thoughts?
No, I don't think so.
All right, well, this wraps up our Thoroughbred Broodmare Transition Symposium. Thank you guys for joining us today here. Thank you for everybody watching online, and have a wonderful afternoon. Oh, yes, and as a reminder, both of these mares are ready for placement. We can contact Second Stride about Lady, and reach out to Kyle at Mareworthy to connect with him about task here. All right.